I guess we are live, as they say. And yeah, let's see if it actually works. It does. Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing? I assume no one's watching because, it's early in the morning and everything, and probably you have better things to do. But this is it. So yeah, good morning. It's Wednesday. What is it? December the 4th. Time is certainly flying, as they say. Now, I hope you already got up or have had a good day in case you are somewhere over there on the other side of the planet. I woke up about an hour ago, decided to finish my reading of the Old Testament, and have just about reached the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. So stuff's going to get very Christian from here on out. I am not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. I mean, in general, I personally find the Old Testament somewhat more interesting, but that's maybe because I'm a cynic and I really, enjoy how it kind of parallels stuff from that I know from like other parts of like studying ancient history and Greek history and Persian history and that kind of stuff. So maybe that's the reason. But yeah, I mean, there is this whole like I don't like I'm not a Christian, right? But I'm interested in the Old Testament because there's all that sex and violence going on. That's certainly true, but I don't think that's something people would say that have like never really truly read the entire thing. Because yes, there is sex and violence, of course. I mean, it's mythology. There's always sex and violence in mythology. That's kind of what mythology is. It's like using words to talk about sex and violence and maybe trying to make sense of that. But I think there's much more interesting stuff going on there as well. Certainly worth reading every couple of years just to see what else you figure out about the world in general, even if you don't believe in any of the things happening in there. So, yeah, I guess I'll finish the whole thing today because the New Testament is not that long and I have nothing much else to do but to, read the Gospels, read the Acts, read the letters, and then read the Revelation, which is certainly, a fun bit, especially if you kind of historicize it and know that it's, well, most likely about someone being really pissed with Nero, which is, warranted, especially if you're a Christian at the time. Certainly not going to make life easier for you. But yeah, that's kind of where we are at the moment with this. So as usual, I'll use the first 45-minute sprint to get stuff done, check in with like messages, all the stuff that I missed over the last couple hours, day, whatever. And then I'll try to continue writing that thing that is definitely not going to be a book, which, we will see how long it'll take me to write this. But then again, I recently saw a video on YouTube pop up. It's like trying Donna Tartt's writing routine. And I found that very interesting. Like in general, I like the idea of saying like of successful writers going, yeah, this is how I do that. And there's obviously different writing routines and people going, well, I wake up at noon and then I drink like a bottle of whiskey and then I sit out on my porch and then I write in the sun until I, take that elephant gun and blast my head off or whatever. But I like the idea of writing routines. Generally, I'm just somewhat confused by sort of like the goal, because if the goal is, and that's something I might have to make a video on, like the general sort of like grift about around writing an author tube and all of that stuff right now, I think is something that is worth talking about. And part of me trying to write a book, or whatever, trying the writing stuff these days is certainly also that I feel qualified to talk about how much bullshit is going on in that field. So there's certainly that. Um, anyway, so going like, well, Donna Tartt's writing routine, I'm like, that's interesting, but if the underlying message is that if you try that writing routine, you will be as successful as Donna Tartt, you are probably missing some of the key points there, which is obviously she has written like 3 novels in the last 40 years. And while, literary fiction certainly has a slower pace when it comes to publishing than fantasy in a lot of cases, there's still some additional things there, right? As far as I know, she doesn't have like a day job. So there is enough independent wealth that allows her to write as meticulously and as slowly as she does, which is brilliant. I mean, don't get me wrong. I very much appreciate that, and I'm happy she has that. But she also went to like one of the, if not the most expensive, like private colleges in the world before that. So there is enough sort of like additional sort of like financial background there that allows her to take that time and write that way. Now, if you go like, well, if my writing routine means I write 5 words per day, and if I've published my one novel in, 10 years, that's totally fine for me, then that's, sure, go ahead. That's perfect. But I feel like a lot of the sort of the author tube content and writing tips content that I see online, not that I watch all of it because it usually makes me really angry very quickly. A lot of it is sort of built on the idea that you publish your first book very soon, and then it tells you how to market it and how to become rich with it. And that's Donna Tartt's writing routine is not something that will make you rich, unless you are already independently wealthy and able to, afford the kind of lifestyle and the kind of education that she got before she actually finished her first book. I mean, I think she left her academy, like the college, in like 84, 85 at that time, and Secret History came out like 5 or 6 years later. And if you look at that, it's like, yeah, that's awesome, but that's not how you become a financially successful author. So it's very interesting to me to see how these kind of things are used. And I kind of get it, like from like her whole presentation and everything that I've seen of someone like Donna Tartt. She's very much living that more like artist life, or she's presenting that image of like an artist, like somewhat somewhat out of time in a lot of ways, and refined, and that's something where I'm not quite sure I agree with. Like, we have this tendency to sort of mystify a lot of things and mystify artists and look up to artists because we believe they're somehow different from us grunts out here not being able to create art or anything of the sorts, right? And there's a lot of downsides to that. The new Leftist Cooks video on when your hero turns out to be a monster, which is, about Neil Gaiman and generally a lot of the good stuff about like parasociality and how fandom works and all of these things. It's a really good video. You should definitely go and watch it if you haven't yet. Parallels a lot of the stuff that I was looking into and reading for the like Final Sanderson video. So I'm very happy someone with way more skill and understanding and credibility and whatnot went down a similar road, even though, with a much darker topic, but with, Gaiman being a predator and Sanderson not as far as I know, and I right now would not make any claims that I believe he could be. He seems to be one of the nicest people out there as a human. Anyway, my point is that we tend to sort of put artists on pedestals and mystify sort of the creation of art at the same time, and it's something that you see a lot when you read interviews and like actual writers, published writers, often like mainstream published writers, but even sometimes, and this is where I think stuff gets interesting, but like let's stick to it for a second, right? Published writers with mainstream publishers often after a while talk about like their writing process, and a lot of times what they do is use very weird, mystic language in a lot of ways. And, it's not always about channeling the muse or whatever, but it goes into that sort of direction because it's very difficult to explain your process, right? In a lot of ways, and how you come up with ideas and how you then turn them into prose or whatever. And there is a tendency to sort of, yeah, as I said, mystify the process of writing, I guess. And when you then look at, say, author Twitter, which I guess is falling apart right now, and look at like AuthorTube, when people start talking about how they create, and they sort of fall into the same pattern. They may not use the same sort of refined language that your litfic author from the 70s would use when talking about how they would come up with ideas and how they would create art, but they still use a lot of sort of like ideas or languages and formulations that seem to more obscure the process, or like what is actually happening than what is happening. And then there's been like obviously entire videos about creating mood boards and stuff, and maybe those help, but maybe they're also just like very pretty, and you can share them on social media, which seems to be a large part of like how to be an author on the internet these days. So I don't know. It's a weird process thing, and part of the whole like me sitting down every morning and writing or trying to write is also part of the motivation is figuring out what it actually means and maybe coming up with a way to explain what I do. And not that that would help anyone, but it would maybe allow me to be mean and about mean to authors on the internet, which is certainly what BookTube is all about, right? So I can do that, and if someone goes, "But have you ever tried?" Then I can go, "Yes, I have tried, and here's what I have learned." Hey, Ida. Well, I've only seen part of it, and I tend to agree. I wouldn't say. I mean, obviously, I've never claimed that I'm an author, so I've not partaken in author Twitter. But I've certainly seen a lot of like from the sidelines stuff going on where I'm like, this is very toxic. This is not going to be a place where I would be happy, being in. And that's certainly something I've learned. And I hope you're good. I'm shocked you're awake already. I'm awake. I've been awake since shortly before 7, and I already read everything from the Book of Jonah all the way until the end of the Book of Malachi, which is not as much. I mean, it's a lot of books, but they're all very, very short. So I've learned about whales and plants and stuff. So yeah, but I had a bit of a rougher night. I couldn't sleep that well. I had a long conversation with a friend yesterday who had a bit of a bad time, and those kind of things leave you somewhat. How how could I put this? Like emotionally taxed afterwards, and obviously, as far as I know, everything is right now, but it's still kind of made for a bit of a rougher night. But it is what it is. So yeah, shall we actually try to do this thing in the original sort of time frame and actually start start the first sprint now, so I can be back at 9, which is 8 for people out there in the oh so weird British Isles, and then I can maybe write more about that wolf, which is sort of something that is happening in the book, which is where it may become more than just a historical book, a historical fiction, something supernatural possibly, although I'm not quite sure yet. Anyway, let's do some sprinting, and I'll talk to you in 45. And back. All right. It was tea drinking sprints for me, Ida, but I hope the coffee worked for you. I certainly did check all the messages and all the stuff, so I guess I'm ready to do the writing thing. I mean, there's always more things I could do. Unfortunately, that shit never ends, but So there's that. Also, obviously, another update now thing popped up while during the sprint, which I'm not going to click on because it's probably requiring a restart of my computer, and I don't want to reboot my computer during sprints, during streams. It's the screen reader software that wants to update, which is obviously a good thing because maybe that'll mean that I'll finally be able to use, the YouTube website in a proper way again. That would be, pretty cool. So there's that. Beyond that, yeah, I did already open up the writing document, so there's that. I have also started taking notes for the next part of the Mormonism video. We'll see if I can actually get it recorded today, or at least get a first version recorded today, because yesterday didn't work. I came home from the gym and then I was so wrecked, like physically and mentally for some reason. It's not like I did anything different from usual. I couldn't get up off my ass to do anything, which is, not helpful. So what can you do? So yeah, that's roughly how I spent this first sprint. And could be worse. I could be much more tired than I am, so I guess it's all good. Yeah. So hopefully I'll finally start reading or rereading Gog Magog later today or tomorrow, so I can get through those to Gog Magog and Ludluda at least this week, because that would be, that would be really cool and helpful. So I have like some form of content out. That is certainly something I hope for. And yeah, I need to probably also check train travels so I can figure out how to go to the Get Wasted and Doomed festival on Saturday, which sounds like the perfect thing to do in December. All right. Yeah, that's worrying. How late is your cat already? I mean, no, I know cats, and sometimes cats do cat things, but then again, it's also usually like weather dependent, and December in Britain doesn't sound like the kind of weather a cat wants to stay outside in. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I hope your cat comes back very soon and all is well with them. Yeah. I mean, that's like always the danger when you have like a cat that is not just like an indoor cat, and obviously, I guess it's kinder to cats to let them outside if you can, don't live next to like a super busy road or whatever where it's kind of dangerous. But I feel cats are more happy when they get to go outside and do cat things outside, which seems to be usually fight other cats, fight anything else they can find, and probably bring home lots of mice, frogs, and anything else they can find. And yeah, that's usually what cats do in my experience when they are let outside. Yeah, that could also be it. That they just like your cat is still like, well, I still got time. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Probably exactly thought that you were still asleep, and now realized that there is an option for food, and now he's got to pretend that he meant to be here earlier and get like held up by traffic or something. I assume cats get held up by traffic just like humans. I mean, that's That makes sense, right? Yeah, what else do I have? I think, like, to come back to the whole writing thing is like, as I like, I'm trying to figure out how to do writing stuff and possibly at the same time figure out how to write about writing, or how to put into words what I'm doing, because oftentimes we do stuff and then go like, hell, but how did I do this? And knowing what you do, I think, is helpful. I mean, I guess that's like one of the things where, say, your creative writing courses at university or whatever, at college, can kind of help, because they do sort of use sort of formalized exercises and stuff to get certain sort of like techniques sort of drilled in, because I guess so much of it is practice, and just using skills and slowly figuring out those skills, or having someone to tell you that this is a skill you might want to use, and so just try doing that for a while. um, I just feel that there is it's a usual internet thing, right? In a lot of ways, where on the one hand, the internet can be incredibly, democratizing, in that you don't have to actually pay high tuition fees to learn shit, because it's free technically, and like as long as you can afford any kind of device to access the internet, you can get a lot of education for free. But there's obviously also no actual control, which leads to a lot of people coming in, becoming, well, being grifters and trying to, get money through, offering writing courses, offering editing services, and so forth. It's like, if I was a writer, like, which, if I had finished a book, or my first book, as a, writer with no deal, nothing yet, how would I know how to get an editor? How would I know what to look for and what to expect? Because I've seen people, that run booktube channels, and that's already, like, I guess, like the first almost positive sign, right? People that run booktube channels and have no background in, studying literature, knowing anything, but, like, their only qualification is to have, like, read hopefully a bunch of books and talked about it on the internet, and them offering professional editing services for, you know, not insignificant amounts of money. And I'm like, yeah, if I kind of jive with your specific taste in books, which I can, sort of gauge through watching your videos, then maybe having you read my book and tell me what you think about it is certainly valuable in some way, because it gives me feedback from someone I would consider, possibly my target audience in a lot of ways, right? That I can see how that can be valuable, but that is not, that's not professional editing. That's neither line editing nor copy editing nor developmental editing. And how would I find out what an actual editor, what's a good editor, and then again, what's a good editor that also is a good fit for me? And I don't know how to do that. And with the internet and doing a lot of, like, social media marketing and having a social media profile and creating, your persona online, it's very easy to sort of pull in people and grift people in that regard. And it's kind of scary how sort of pervasive that is already in that entire sort of, like, uh, author space on social media. Hey, Britton, how you doing? And that's like a quick anecdote. It was fascinating. Like, I'm on Blue Sky, obviously, and I got a couple new followers because I think one or two people put me in their, like, starter packs for booktubers or whatever. So a couple of new people followed me, and I mentioned, like, in one post that I'm, doing some writing stuff. Just, like, mentioned the fact that I'm writing words, basically. And then I got, like, a message by someone going like, "Hey, how's your writing going?" And their profile says that they're, like, a self-published author, or that they're an author, and I'm like, okay, whatever. So I'm like, oh, well, it's going. It's like, well, have you already thought about a cover and a book trailer and everything? I'm okay. This is going to be, hey, I can do all of this for you very cheaply. Please give me money. And I'm like, hey, no worries. This is not something I need right now. And then they're like, well, but I think the first thing you need to do is establish a brand. For that, you need, like, a custom profile pic. Do you want to work with me? And I'm like, fuck's sake, right? And now I'm a cynical asshole, and I don't expect anything to come of this whole like writing stuff that I'm doing at the moment, right? But there's a lot of people out there who are maybe younger, maybe more naive, maybe hopeful or whatever, and they really would go for this. And even if only a few people fall for this, it's already kind of fucked up. The people, there's a whole narrative that you have to have like a social media brand and platform and audience to even have a chance at getting signed by any publisher. Because if you don't bring in like 100,000 followers on Instagram, who's going to buy your book anyway? And I don't think that is necessarily the case. I don't think that's how the publishing industry works in general. I mean, there's probably something like that, and it will be an asset if you have a social media following up to a point. I'm pretty sure that's the case. But I have a comment on Reedsy in a moment, Ada, but I'm interested in your experience with them as an author because yeah. But my point is that there's this narrative, and a lot of sort of like author tubers will always talk about like how it's important to establish like a brand and everything. That's, I guess, mostly what those people on author tube, not so much author Twitter, but like also author Twitter, but like a lot of people constantly talking about what they're writing and stuff, and all their mood boards and stuff. A lot of people are doing this because they believe that what they need is a social media brand. And if someone kind of comes new into this space and sees all of that happening, and then they get an offer to have like to help have someone who is already supposedly an established writer, a self-published author or whatever, come over and like, hey, you want me to help you with this because I've done this before, that there will be people falling for this, and that's kind of fucked up. Yeah, Britton, I watched that video too. So I'll get to that in a second. First, the Reedsy thing. So I find Reedsy. The Reedsy messaged me like last year, and it's like, hey, would you like to work as a reviewer for us? We're this, we're this platform, and we offer all these services to authors, including, reviews, which is, I think, one of the things that authors pay for. Like, you pay for like some reviews, and supposedly they'll, I mean, obviously they put them on their website, and they have this like newsletter and stuff like that. And if the author likes your review, they can tip you. And I'm like, but you're obviously not paying me anything because I'm just a reviewer. I'm not an editor. So we're editors, as far as I see this with Reedsy, like you pay the editor and they take a cut and everything. But they sort of like the middleman, the platform that has vetted editors, at least. I don't know what their vetting process is. But so there's some level of oversight there versus, say, Fiverr, where there's like no oversight. On the other hand, the reviewers that are still packaged as part of their like package that you get as an author, right? They don't get any money unless the author wants to tip you. And like, what's the chance of, getting tipped? Well, obviously the chance is, you write the most glowing positive review ever, which is, not what an editorial review should be. And that's something I found scammy or grifty in that regard. More in that they are probably exploiting like the way the whole thing was framed and pitched to me. They're more like exploiting the hopes of booktubers, book reviewers to become more professional by, producing potentially professional work and for free for a platform that is then selling that as part of its service to authors. And that rubs me the wrong way. But maybe the editing service does actually work well. I wouldn't know. I think it's also very much dependent on like personal experience, because from where I'm standing, I've obviously never had to deal with that. I think like a good editor is very much like a therapist, maybe a therapist for your book, but you know what I mean? It's like you have to fit with the editor. You have to understand each other. They have to understand what you want, and unless they're just doing copy editing, when yeah. But if it's more like developmental editing and stuff like that, that kind of editor is sort of like a therapist. So you need to try out a couple to feel what kind of works and so forth. And if you get lucky with something like Reedsy, that's perfect. And if you have a bad experience, then I guess it can be really bad. But I'm not sure if Reedsy is to blame for that. I mostly just found the approach of like how they approached me as a person on BookTube and how they are pitching their service in that regard. I found that scammy, or at least scummy. Let me put it this way. So yeah, I watched that video as well. I would argue that he can't do that, the thing that you suggest, Britton, because he doesn't read broadly enough to actually understand that. And you can tell that from the video that he made about cover artworks, because he put in Darkome by Hannu Rajaniemi, which I read, and complained about how the cover doesn't look fantasy enough. Now I've read that book, and it's a very near future techno thriller about gene editing and gene hacking. That's not a fantasy book. That does not need a fantasy cover. Having a more abstract kind of thing as a cover artwork for that book makes perfect sense. It's exactly the kind of thing that fits the mood of the book. So yeah, it doesn't work. And he's often kind of falling for that kind of stuff, I think. And that's like, I mean, I've watched different booktubers do their videos on certain issues they have with the publishing industry, and it always annoys me no end because they're always like, "Well, this sucks right now," and I'm like, "Yeah, this sucks," and then they stop, and I'm like, "Look, I know I'm the evil Marxist out here, and I'm not even a Marxist as such. But I've read some Marx. Like, if you are unhappy with the publishing industry, you should think about the fact that it is an industry, and industries do certain things under the system that we live in. That system is capitalism. You need to be aware of that kind of stuff and not just go, well, they're not not publishing the kind of books I want. And it's so fucking frustrating with someone like a Library of a Viking, because I know he's studied he's like an MBA or something. He studied business administration. That guy should understand how this shit goes and why publishers make certain decisions. And he kind of sometimes mentions like, well, maybe they're easier to produce and whatever. And like, so you're complaining at a company whose goal it is to maximize revenue, that they are not doing the thing that will possibly not maximize their revenue. It's like, that's just like bad. Like that's the kind of discourse that will never go anywhere, because all you do is complain, go like, world bad, possibly because of woke. And that's fucked up and stupid. And like, if I could force every single fucking booktuber doing that specific kind of thing, doing those kind of publishing industry discourse, to just read one fucking leftist or whatever analysis book of how capitalism and neoliberalism work, I would do it, because guys, get some fucking perspective. You can still go, well, capitalism seems to be the best system we have right now, but you need to understand what is going on and how that works, because you can't just go like, well, I don't like it. It's like, yeah, neither do I, but what you going to do about it? It's empty discourse, because it doesn't ever have like any sort of like idea of like what to change beyond like, hey, bring back cool covers. And I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know. I have not watched her, although she does get recommended to me a lot, and I think I should probably watch her. Yeah, that's the point. It's like, I mean, you have some people who have backgrounds in it, but that's kind of my point is, if you talk about the publishing industry's practices, you need to understand that it is an industry, and a lot of the stuff going on there goes on in every single industry, possibly with like some specialization for, what you might call entertainment industry. But these are general processes. And if all you go is, I don't like it, you don't need to make the video, right? And that's like the frustrating thing, because I don't expect anyone to just like every booktuber to just pull out like a full-on Marxist analysis of where we are right now. That's not the point, but at least acknowledge the fact that these are systemic issues, and not just some guy in cover design at Barnes, whatever publisher, at Random House, having a shit taste when it comes to fantasy books, or possibly not liking fantasy in general. There's something larger behind that, and someone who has studied business administration should know that. So it feels disingenuous, and that's kind of the frustrating thing. And I've been thinking about making a video about that, but then again, I think I said the same thing when I talked about the whole why epic fantasy is not dying kind of issue. And I feel like every couple of months that kind of discourse comes up again about some other topic that people are unhappy with. And no one ever makes that step and goes like, well, we should maybe look at like why publishers behave that way. They're not mean. They're doing good, right? If Barnes and Nobles has record sales because of BookTok, complaining that BookTok books suck is not going to get you anywhere, because we're expecting publishers to not publish BookTok books now that they are selling. That's not how fucking capitalism works. I mean, you can argue that what we need is like we need to nationalize book publishing and have like a 5-year plan for epic fantasy. You can do that. I'm not sure I would want that, but if you want that, then you need to sort of acknowledge that that is not the system that we're living under, and you need to call for a book Soviet, I guess. Britain, I've seen videos like that, I think, but I haven't clicked on them because they seemed very, very weirdly right-wing troll-ish, clickbaity. I think it's the whole discourse around that whole subject sucks. I'm always tempted to make a video, but then I'm like, what am I gonna say, right? We have old white dudes who are pissed off that suddenly dragons can fuck, and then we have the rest of the world who either reads books about dragons that fuck or just doesn't care. And both of these are, I mean, those other options are good. Complaining about dragons fucking is bullshit, because there's still enough, manly fantasy out there if you want it. It's more like not feeling special anymore, and having women come to our last like readout out there where we could still be man, I guess. It kind of ties to that video that I made like last year, 2 years ago, where the one about like if Nazis have a right to escapism. I'm like, so much about that stuff is just like people being unhappy with the world and going, well, I guess I'm gonna blame all the girls on BookTok. And that's stupid. It's also dangerous and pernicious, but that's the point. Now you know why I haven't made a video on it. I think it's bullshit. Men read a lot of fantasy still. They are not as publicly present maybe on TikTok, for example. But then again, if we have nothing to say, then why would we be on BookTok? And then there's obviously there is certainly an issue there that is where I feel less comfortable talking about it. I would love to have like a conversation about that with a woman that is on BookTok or BookTube or whatever, because I feel there is that unfortunate sexist component where if you are a conventionally attractive woman on the internet, you will get more views and clicks. You'll also get way more hatred, because there is a significant amount of men, mostly men in this case, probably younger men, but I'm not quite sure, like a significant amount of men who will click on any video that has a to them attractive woman, because they're, I guess, desperate, horny, or whatever, and don't understand that content is not about, watching beautiful people, but possibly about content. And that is frustrating, but that certainly might be one of the reasons why, say, women on BookTok are, much more prevalent than dudes on BookTok. That it may be part of it. Also, there is the thing that, they have a community there where, until, grumpy elitist snobs on and proto-fascists on YouTube discovered their community and have found reasons to hate them and, be misogynist about it. But until then, they had like a community where they could, talk about stuff they found interesting, talk to each other, and just express being themselves. And that is part, I think, of what made BookTok blow up so much in a lot of ways. And everyone else is jealous about it. And as I said, that these are sort of like my very unfiltered and undeveloped thoughts on it. But because so much of this is about, gender roles and stuff, I would feel more comfortable talking about it with someone who is, I don't want to mansplain the whole thing, is my point. I want someone who has had the experience of being a femme presenting booktuber or booktalker to sort of, give me their sort of experience, or sort of like tell me about how it feels for them. And I think that would be perfect. On the other hand, me being me, how would I find someone like that? You know what I mean? Well, I'll talk about that one final thing, Britton, and then we go back to sprinting. I think, yes, read what you want. It can't be that hard is true. And there's probably lots of people who do exactly that. The problem is the discourse is happening on social media, where what we do is read as a form of performance, right? And we talk about books as a form of performance. So we have to be performative about the kind of books we read, and we have to be performative about what we think about them, and we have to be performative about the whole larger discourse. So if suddenly my videos talking about another big book about dudes with swords don't do as well, and suddenly there's all these girls popping up talking about dragon sex all the time, that feels like I'm losing sort of like clout, maybe losing presence in this ongoing discourse. It feels like I'm not as important as I deserve to be. And I think that's partly where the whole like annoyance about like men don't read fantasy anymore and so forth comes from. And it's obviously it's bullshit, but it's very difficult to sort of realize it's bullshit, or overcome these relatively sort of like intuitive or like emotional aspects of it, I think. Yeah, of course. I mean, look, the problem is, or what do you mean like problem? I mean, the thing is, most of us on BookTube, including me and you, I guess, are people who have no experience in the publishing industry, who have very little experience working for social media companies, having a behind the scenes look at how social media works, and have probably no or very little training when it comes to literary criticism, when it comes to like studying literature and so forth in general. We're mostly people who, enjoyed books about dragons or swords and shit since we were like teenagers, and have now found a way to rant about it on the internet because we figured out our cameras now have phones. And that is fine if all we do is talk about the books that we really love and go like, man, you got to read this because this sword is even longer, right? It's really fine. But once we start to make claims that go beyond that, once we start talking about, systemic issues, once we talk about stuff that's not about like why I like the book, but more about why I think other people are wrong about books and so forth, that's where lacking that training, lacking that knowledge, lacking that background, lacking that experience comes in, is a problem. To bring it back to Johan from Library of a Viking, right? He, looking at the books he reads and the books he gets, he talks about, he can't make a video about like whether fantasy is losing its identity, and talk about writing and tropes and stuff like that, because he hasn't read any of those books. Like, yeah, he's read the big names and stuff like that from what he talks about, and he owns multiple special editions and stuff, but he can't actually talk about the broader field of fantasy because he doesn't know enough about it. It's like, I don't know enough about it. I know enough to know that I don't know enough about it because I at least follow some, look at lists of like popular books in different magazines, look at who's shortlisted for different kinds of awards, do all of that stuff, and like follow other booktubers, book talkers. No, I don't follow book talkers, but people on Blue Sky and whatnot that read very different stuff from me, and I look at what the print magazines like Locus and so forth are talking about, and I'm like, there's so much out there that I haven't read, that I don't know anything about, and that BookTube in general knows very little about. It's like, there's two people, as far as I know, that have talked about The Siege of Burning Grass on BookTube. That is Angela from Literature Science Alliance, who didn't like it, as far as I know. I haven't watched her video on it. And there's me. That book was shortlisted for an Ursula Le Guin award, and most of BookTube has never heard about it. And I'm pretty sure someone like Johan hasn't read it and maybe doesn't even know it exists. So how can he make a statement about fantasy's identity without knowing these books exist and what those books are about? As I said, I mean, he didn't even know that Darkholme is, in fact, like, a near future techno thriller, which is not fantasy by any means. And that makes it very difficult to have like actual, arguments that have any foundation in reality. And I think that's part of like why so much discourse on BookTube is not good. Like, I mean, I know my videos aren't that good, but at least I try, right? I know my limitations, and I try to sort of overcome them, which is why I read, books about literature and about literary criticism, and read books about history of fantasy and academic texts on fantasy to slowly build up that thing that I don't have because I didn't study literature. Most people don't do that, and even with the little I know, I already see where others don't know anything, and that's it's frustrating because on the one hand, having that enthusiastic content and commentary and community about just like loving books is really cool, and I want that, and I want the very low entry barrier to be as low as possible so anyone can do this and enjoy talking about it and do whatever they want with it. The problem is once we start claiming that we know more than we do, and that's sort of like where I get my frustrations from. All right, that went longer than I thought. So let's actually do the second sprint, and let's see if I can actually get some writing done. Wouldn't that be, pretty cool? So I'll talk to you around 10:15, and until then, please try to be productive. Read something, write something, eat something, drink something. I don't know. Set something on fire. Legally, I guess. And I am back. How did everyone do? And how did everyone do? I did indeed do some writing. I did finish, hopefully finish the sort of layout or structure for the next part of the Mormonism video, and then I went over to the fiction thing and I did write a little bit. It's not as much as I wanted to, but then again, that Mormonism thing does have some priority at the moment. So at least I got that thing worked out, and now I can go to the gym and let it sort of stew at the back of my head while working out, and then maybe I'll make some corrections when I come back home and can record at least one part later today. Wouldn't that be, superb? Oh, I just saw that I'm logged in to YouTube with the wrong account. So yeah. Anyway, let's ignore that for the time being. And yeah, I guess that's another sprint or another breakfast sprint, more or less wrapped up. Not too bad. Did get some stuff done. That's all I wanted. Had some tea. Got only slightly riled up. That's okay. Well, I mean, the school run is important, so good on you for that. I did, yeah, as I said, write some, make some new tea, and gonna try and do the workout thing now. Get at least some exercise in, and hopefully I'll, recognize any further things I missed out in the script, script like list of stuff, bullet points, or whatever you want to call it for the Mormonism video while there, so I won't have to record the thing and then go back and go, oh, fuck, I missed this, and re-record, because, the less times I have to re-record bits, the better and the faster this will be done, which is kind of, not necessary, but at this point, I want to move on. But, all right, I guess I'd better start figuring, packing my shit so I can catch the bus. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. I'll be back tomorrow morning, I guess. So maybe I'll see some of you then. And yeah, let's, hopefully have a good day, everybody, and maybe not, suffer too much from the weather, the world, and all the other stuff going on right now.